Coulrophobia is described as the fear of clowns. From their painted faces to their unpredictable behavior, clowns have been a source of terror for centuries. And why wouldn't they be? Even in popular culture, movies like It have embedded that fear into us. However, today we're going to look at more personal encounters with these circus freaks. Here are 3 disturbing clown horror stories. When I was a kid, I loved birthday parties, especially my own. But on my 11th birthday, I had an experience that changed everything. My parents hired a clown for my party from a flyer they got in the mail. For frame of reference, this was when I was living in Bridgewater, Vermont. It's a really small town and there isn't much to do around there besides the occasional hike up the mountains. Everyone in the neighborhood knew each other to some extent. And thinking back, I guess I should have noticed the red flags about having a clown at my birthday party. I mean, as far as I know, there wasn't anyone in the neighborhood who had a habit of dressing up like a clown. Regardless, I was a kid. I was excited to see what he had in store for us. Things immediately took a turn, however. He arrived 2 hours before anybody else, and I could tell something was off about him. His makeup was smudged like it was put on in a hurry, and he seemed agitated. I can't remember exactly, but I recall overhearing my old man and the clown talking about the condition he arrived at the party in. He was sweaty and forgot most of his tricks. Anyway, I didn't think too much of it at the time and welcomed him. As the party started, the clown started doing his thing. He made balloon animals for my friends, juggled colorful balls, and did magic tricks. All seemed well at the time. I mean, everybody was having a blast. But as the party went on, I kept noticing something strange about this clown. He would pause, stare at me for a minute, and then continue his performance. His stare made me feel really uncomfortable. But I didn't want to make a big deal out of it because the other kids were loving it. The last thing I wanted to be is the party pooper at my own party, right? But then, during the cake cutting ceremony or whatever, the clown did something that really terrified me. He suddenly pulled out a knife and started walking towards me. You'd think this was for cutting the cake, but this was just wrong. I remember time slowing down as he was inching closer. The clown's eyes were dark and sinister, and I knew I was in danger. And I just knew I was in danger. I curled up into a ball, closed my eyes, and screamed as hard as I could, preparing for the worst. But then I heard a commotion. My dad had tackled the clown to the ground, and the knife had fallen out of his hand. The clown tried to escape, but my dad held him down until the police got there. It felt like it took forever, but I finally heard the sirens closing in. It turned out that the clown was a convict who had escaped from prison and had taken on a job as a birthday clown to hide from the authorities. My dad was awarded the Bridgewater Bravery Award by the local sheriff's department for aiding in the capture of a fugitive, something he doesn't shut up about to this day. But the incident left me traumatized, and even now, I can't seem to shake off the feeling of being in danger every time I see a clown in public. I can't trust anyone in a clown costume anymore, and I avoid them at all costs. I'm going to paint you a picture of one of the most disturbing experiences I've ever been through. This story goes back to when I was 14 years old and living with my folks in Buena Vista, Colorado. The Rocky Mountain Carnival was going to be in town for the 3rd year in a row in just a couple of weeks, and this time I wasn't going to miss out. I got super excited and started saving up to go on as many rides as I possibly could. I was particularly looking forward to the bumper cars, since I'd always been a car freak, and the thought of being able to crash into your friends with no risks, sign me up. Anyway, the day finally came, and me and my buddies Eric and Sam were having a blast. The carnival was everything I had hoped for. From the food to the games, it was awesome. As the night grew darker and things were starting to shut down, I couldn't help but feel sad that it was over. That was when we stumbled across a tent with a sign that read, "Menagerie of Fear." My friends were hesitant, and why wouldn't they be with a sign like that? But I was intrigued. I had always been a fan of horror movies, so I was eager to see what this was all about. I mean, I wanted everything to end with a bang, right? We entered the tent, and the atmosphere changed immediately. It was dimly lit, and there were clowns everywhere, each with an eerie smile on their painted faces. Luckily, they were just mannequins. Or so I thought. We walked through a maze of mirrors, and I noticed a clown in the corner of my eye. He was standing still, had a long nose, black and white makeup, and wore a colorful suit. I brushed it off and continued walking, but I felt his presence following us. Suddenly, one of my friends screamed, and we turned around to see the clown was gone. We continued through the maze, and I could feel my heart racing with every step. The air was thick, and I was sweating like crazy. I saw the clown again, but this time he was closer. I froze, and then he stared at me with his cold, dead eyes. They were like the eyes of a dead fish. His makeup was melting off his face. I was paralyzed with fear, and I couldn't move. Suddenly, he lunged toward me, and I screamed for my friends to run. We made it out of the tent, and I collapsed onto the ground, trembling, and I was crying like a baby. I didn't care who saw me. It took me a half hour to calm down so I could regain strength in my legs to even stand up. As we walked away from the tent, I couldn't shake off the feeling that the clown was still watching me. I'd become extremely sensitive to the slightest touch. My friends tried to console me, but I couldn't stop shaking. The carnival never felt the same after that, and I couldn't bring myself to trust anyone wearing clown makeup ever again. I had nightmares for weeks, and even now, I can still see his haunting smile in my mind. I tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe it was just a performer trying to scare us? Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something more sinister going on. I researched the carnival and found out that it had a dark history. There were rumors of a performer who went insane and killed several people before disappearing the next morning. Maybe he had returned that day. Does that mean I could have been his latest victim? A billion questions were swimming around in my head. Time passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about the clown. I became obsessed enough to want to find out more about him. I went back to the carnival several times in the following years, trying to see if I could replicate the situation as it happened that one time. But he was never there. It was like he had disappeared into thin air. I've never been one to shy away from a good scare. In fact, I often sought them out, whether it was through movies or haunted house attractions, whatever. You could say I was a bit of a daredevil when it comes to that. But one encounter I had with a clown a few years back still haunts me to this day. This was in the winter of 2011, and I was 19 at the time. It was late at night, and I was walking home from working as a receptionist at the local hospital on the night shift. The streets were deserted, and the only sound I could hear was the clicking of my shoes on the pavement. This was back in my hometown of Marfa, Texas. I had to walk 20 minutes to the station, then get on a train that would take me to my parents' house. And it had been maybe 10 or 12 minutes since I started walking that night. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing in the distance, illuminated by a flickering street lamp. As I approached, I realized it was a clown. Out of all the things, I thought to myself. Then a chill ran down my spine as I took in its white face paint and red nose. It felt like its eyes were looking right into my soul, and its unnerving grin made my stomach turn. He was dancing and enjoying himself on the sidewalk, while my heart was pounding in my chest as I was trying to make sense of what was happening. He didn't say a word, but his grin only grew wider, making my skin crawl. I tried to push past it since this was my only way home, but it grabbed my arm with a grip so tight I could feel my bones grinding together. I screamed for help, but nobody came. The clown continued to hold me captive, its grin a twisted parody of joy. As the seconds ticked by, I began to feel a strange sensation in my body, like my energy was being drained away. I tried to fight back, but the clown was too strong. Its grip only tightened, and I could feel myself getting weaker and weaker. Eventually, I collapsed to the ground. My vision was blurred as I struggled to stay conscious from the fear. The last thing I heard was the squeaking of its shoes hitting the ground. And then that's it. Lights out. When I came to, the clown was gone, and I was in a state of shock and confusion. I stumbled home, and my mind was racing with questions that would never be answered. Why did the clown choose me? What did it want from me? And most importantly, why was there clown makeup on my face? I'm assuming when I was unconscious, he put it on me. This felt to me like a reminder to never forget what had happened that day. I cried for hours in the arms of my mother and father to regain some semblance of comfort within my own body. In the days and weeks that followed, more and more stories of encounters with clowns started popping up on the internet and YouTube. I'm sure you've all seen them by now. It's hard to believe I was one of those victims, but let me tell you, it's scarier in real life than it is on the net. I think it's safe to say I have coulrophobia now. If you thought these stories were scary, then make sure you watch this next video here if you really want to be scared.